Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 95th episode of Uncut History live here on Readout Productions. I was having to do Battle of StreamYards once again before we went live. I could not get the Google Slides to connect. I'm going to be blunt. StreamYards is like $44 a month to have the basic subscription. Yes, every stream we've done in the past few months, I start by complaining about StreamYards because, it used to be a really good software. I think it was like about $24.95, $25 to have the minimum package. You could advance up to the $44, and then you could go even up to higher tiers. And I even considered, at one point having the higher tiers, but for the small scale streams we've done, the smallest package was great. And then they upped it to $44. And then every flipping time I log in to start a new stream, they've changed the dashboard again. The user interface, it's all foobar. Every week. It is one of my biggest pet peeves every time I have to log in. Just trying to figure out where everything has been moved this week, and then to try to connect other things like other slides, other web pages I want to share to you guys. So, sorry to enter on an angry note. We are talking about the Texas Revolution tonight, particularly what happened after the fall of the Alamo. So maybe I should be a little angrified to represent the feeling of Texians during the final stages of the revolution. So that's my tie-in. That's my segue. If you're tuned in tonight, we are on 3 different platforms streaming. Of course, the TubeU. We're on Rumble. We're on Twitter for the very first time. We are streaming to X. I did check in earlier. It seems to be working. At least on my end, it seemed to have been working. So if you're tuning in, you're going to pass in and out. You may want to hang out in the shadows. I understand. I could be a shadow being as well sometimes. But at least once chime into the chat to let us know you're there, to listen in as we talk about the Battle of San Jacinto, the climax of the Texas Revolution. And it's been a long time since we've done one of these. It's been a long time since we've done a virtual battle walk. I think in the past I actually called them battle discussions, but I've rechristened this as a virtual battle walk. And what I mean is this is going to be a little above our normal live stream. So if you've tuned in for our presidential throwdowns or one of our preservation shout outs, when I decide I am going to do a battle walk, a virtual battle walk, a battle discussion, usually involves a slideshow. It's a presentation, but I try to show you as best I can what the sites look like today where these key locations occurred. And this one, the last time we did these, we did a lot of these a few years ago during the American Civil War. I don't know if they've been watching in, was tuned in live when we did our 160th anniversary commemoration of the Overland Campaign. That was between the Union Army of Ulysses S. Grant and the Confederate Army of Robert E. Lee. For several weeks, we were on the anniversaries talking about the battles in the wilderness, Spotsylvania Courthouse, North Anna, Cold Harbor. And we even pivoted over to the Shenandoah Valley for 1 week to talk about Newmarket because that was going on at the same time. So I love doing these streams. I mean, I don't think it's no secret that one of my most passionate side projects, hobbies, whatever you want to call them, one of my niches in history is military history, American military history. And I would love talking all day about tactics, talking about great leaders, critiquing not so great leaders, talking about what people experience, these very violent events. I don't condone the violence, but very violent events, important events that cost people's lives and gave us the country and world we live in today. Mostly, I was doing our virtual battle walks on the American Civil War. This is only the second time we've kind of done one on the Texas Revolution. The last time we did one, I didn't even officially say it was a battle discussion. We just more talked about the Alamo in general. I didn't have a slideshow. I didn't have a timeline. I just more was showing you all the cool stuff you can see at the site of the Alamo in downtown San Antonio. But this time, we got a full slideshow, as you can see. So, and I got notes. Oh boy, I have in my free time, if there's ever a thing, the past few weeks, I've been spend it between writing a script for a future episode of Retracing History that has nothing to do with what we're talking about tonight, been spending time working on that. And then I've been spending time researching. I've had such a fun time. I don't know. There's something about the Texas Revolution that I'm so fascinated by, amongst all the other. You have your big American Revolution. That's the big bang for American history, I would argue. Yes, stuff happened before, but I would consider that's the big bang of American history, the American Revolution. And then I hear a lot about Pennsylvania's regional events, regional history. I hear about the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794. I hear about the Gettysburg Campaign of 1863. I know about the local industrial history, but it's important to remember what we have 50 states now. All 50 states have unique origin stories, and Texas may have the single most interesting of all the origin stories. At the very least, it's one of the most violent. And it's definitely one of the most tense and controversial. So it's fascinating to dig into the origin story of our 28th state, Texas. And Books and Battlefields has tuned in tonight. Welcome to the stream. What did I miss? You missed me ranting about StreamYards for the umpteenth time. You didn't miss too much. You didn't miss the history. You just missed read out ranting, which is never nothing normal. Can you leak the topic of the upcoming video you're writing a script for? If you're a member of the Garrison, I would strongly request you don't leak it, because I have told members of the Garrison that have alluded to what they've seen images. They haven't seen the script, but they've seen images. So I would politely request that you don't be a leak, or else I, as a plumber, will have to go in and tighten those leaks. Then again, there's nothing I can stop from the flow of free speech. Texans are Texans first and Americans. Yeah, that's how they are. Yeah, it's one of the states. They're the only state we still, the American Civil War kind of changed everybody's perspective of one from state first, country next to country first, state later. Yeah, Texas is kind of the exception to that. They've never let that go, and with good reason, as you're going to learn tonight. Alrighty, so where do we begin? Well, on one hand, we're picking off where we left off a month ago when we talked about the siege of the Alamo. So we're picking up basically right after the collapse of the Alamo's defense. All of its defenders have been massacred. But I also need to introduce those that may just be tuning in for the first time tonight. What is going on in the Texas Revolution? What's this all about? So I gotta quickly sum up the Texas Revolution up to March of 1836, and then we can segue back in. So I think what you need to understand is, in the late 18th century, the globe was going through revolution, new ideas of how one can be governed. The most noteworthy example is the American Revolution, where the British American colonists overthrowed the authority of the British crown in North America. They didn't destroy the whole country. They just overthrew. They kicked off monarch and parliamentary rule over the colonies, and they established their own constitutional republic that took many different ideas from different philosophers in Europe, as well as in certain indigenous tribes, how they were governing in the tribal councils, and they were taking ideas all over the place. There's no one single root that inspired the American Revolution. And it becomes the idea that we have of a constitutional republic today. And a lot of people, this idea that a government, a representative government coming into the late 18th century, something that's really not been seen in a long time in the history books. But yeah, you go far back to Roman and Greek times, you're going to find republics. But as you're getting into the medieval times, a lot of people are not accustomed to this, having a republic on a large scale, especially a constitutional republic, and especially having one like the United States would have, where you have your states, and then you have your federal government. You have your layers of federalism. Mr. G's listening in somewhere, and he's very proud of me right now. I'm using my layers of federalism, where you have lower level, upper tier, national government, state government, and they're both to check and balance each other. Other countries are going to try that. Some work, some don't. The American Revolution inspires many revolutions. The French Revolution is one, for example. But also, it's important to remember there's a lot of influence going into other European countries that are starting to be on the way out. for lack of better terms. They're starting to lose their control over their subjects. Spain is another one of those. Spain actually is an ally of the United States during the American Revolution, just like France. Look what happened to both of America's big allies in the Revolution. They completely fall apart due to infighting and revolutionary sentiments. France is the more famous. Spain is much more complicated. I can't say it's a one-for-one direct result of the American Revolution, but I do feel I think some of the friction from the American Revolution rubbed off on certain parts of the Spanish Empire, which was already in a very slow decline. The last of which, I mean, you could keep talking about the Spanish Empire's decline up to 1898. And we're not going to get sidetracked on the Spanish-American War. That's a video for another day that I've already done. In particular, Spanish claims over North America were in much turmoil. There was a period in time when Spain and France tried to share the lands west of the Mississippi River, and that didn't really work too well. And then you have the United States rapidly growing to the Mississippi River. It's applying pressure on both France and Spain. Eventually, France sold their Louisiana territory to the United States, and Spain went, we didn't agree to that's our territory. No. We share the territory. And Napoleon's like, yeah, funny about that, huh? I'm having a nice payday. Oh, thanks, Jefferson. So, and now Spain, in the early 1800s, Spain's having a real difficult time holding their vast quantities of land in North America. And eventually, their own colonists and the descendants of those colonists, Mexicans, they're eventually going to try to have their own rebellion. I am not going to pretend to understand the Mexican War of Independence. It's very complicated, as David Tennant, the 10th Doctor, would best put it. What you need to know is the American Revolution is much more coherent than the Mexican Revolution of the 19th century. And at the end of it, the ruling party in Mexico, which now had gotten its independence from Spain, had tried to... First, they tried a monarchy. They tried an empire. That didn't work. Then they set up a republic, and the idea was not too dissimilar from the United States. You would have districts, you would have states in Mexico, although the states had much more pull than this national government. And they wanted to beef up their population in the northern part of Mexico, because funny story about that. It's kind of dry. It's kind of inhospitable climate. It's very difficult to live there. And since there wasn't a lot of communities, I shouldn't say there weren't, but big fortified communities up in the plains area that people wanted to live in, well, it was wide open to attack by an assortment of indigenous tribes that were going across the plains, coming up and down the Rocky Mountains. Displaced native tribes are now being pushed into present-day Oklahoma in the Midwest region of the United States. They're colliding with Mexicans that are trying to move north and try to settle there because it's cheap land, so it's easy to take. Mexico realized it had a population problem, and if you get a bunch of people to colonize the northern part of your newfound country, it was hoped, hey, these people will move in, set up communities, they'll become Catholic, they'll follow our belief, our customs, it's going to allow our country to grow and be equal in North American affairs to like the United States of America. Not so much outright fighting the United States, but we will be equals. So there were incentives made for people to come to Mexico and settle in places like the state of Texas. And for the record, Texas actually was much larger. What was it? Coahuila, I think it was like Coahuila and Texas was this state district. It wasn't just Texas, but Texas for simplicity's sake. And, many people were attracted to this idea that, hey, Mexico's giving us all this land. All we have to do is join the Roman Catholic Church, agree to certain taxes, certain land grants, certain customs, and we're all good. And there's actually a lot more freedoms than there is staying in the United States of America. So Texas becomes this second chance area for many Americans, especially those that are living in the western parts of the United States. So they're going to start moving in. They're going to become Mexican citizens. They're going to start buying land. They're going to start joining the Roman Catholic Church. Unfortunately, for Mexico at least, there was a lot of corruption going on the state level. A lot of your republic, the people that were pro-republic, yeah, they tended to get away with more than they should have by Mexican law. I'm not going to deny it. So you have all sorts of money schemes going on, and not a lot of money's going into the pocket of the actual Mexican government, is what I'm saying. So yeah, a lot of corruption's going on. Not going to deny it. And eventually, by the late 1820s, Mexico is already going to go through several regime changes. So you have all these regime changes down in the central part of Mexico. The northern part of Mexico, like Texas, they're like minding their own business. They can just go on and do really whatever they want because, hey, the government keeps changing every year, so nobody's coming up and stopping us. Oh, we're not going to talk about the Haitian Revolution today, but no, I'm fully aware about the Haitian Revolution, one of the only successful slave revolts, mass-scale slave revolts. And yep, I'm sure, remember the Alamo. Oh, we're going to get there. Oh, we're all getting there in good time. So, like I said, I'm currently just trying to build up why the Texas Revolution happened. So, bunch of Americans moved into the state of Texas, which this time was part of Mexico. The idea was, hey, Mexico needs a bigger population in its northern states, its northern districts, kind of be a buffer between indigenous raids and the interior of the country, and we want to be equal. We want to be an equal power in North America. So this is a cheap, quick way of growing our population. Just allow people to come in, colonize, settle, and maybe one day to become citizens. Eventually, there was a lot of corruption going on in the states, amongst the states' governments. This is going to lead to Mexico eventually turning into what they call the Central Republic of Mexico, which really was the idea was we're going to no more statehoods, no more districts. Everything is going to the central government now. The central government is the absolute authority of the land. And they would have a president in charge. Up to this point, up to the mid-1830s, a man who had been president for 4 times is the guy on the right there. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, El Presidente. Even to this day, historians really are uncertain what his true political allegiances were. He's described as a political chameleon because at one point, at the start of Mexico's war for independence, he was with the royalists. He sided with Spain. But after certain backdoor politics, he began to side with the rebels in the latter stages of the conflict. And then, of course, we got the Republic of Mexico. That was around. That didn't work. Now we're in the Central Republic of Mexico. Santa Anna was elected 4 times to be president. Elected, some of them. Santa Anna, although he's well known as being the dictator, the dictatorial president of Mexico for most of the 19th century, in truth, his terms were very brief. In actual office, Santa Anna did not like politics. Like, he had his political opinions and he had a vision for Mexico, but he wasn't good at diplomacy. The only way he was able to exert his will and shape Mexico into how he wanted it operated was through military force. And he viewed himself as this almighty general, that he was going to be he was going to be Mexico's great war hero. I mean, that's kind of what he envisioned himself as. And that's what kept him getting into the presidency before and after the Texas Revolution. Oh God, the amount of times he got into the presidency after. Oh, I have the stat. It's wild. Winfield Scott did to him what Hulk did to Loki. Yeah, well, the man on the left actually did it to him first. So Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, he is the El Presidente, as many of his soldiers know him as. Keep in mind, he wasn't in office typically for very long periods of time, but he was such a charismatic figure, or a figure people feared because of how ruthless he could be on the battlefield, that he tended to be able to shape the Mexican government to his whim whenever possible. And when it becomes apparent that Texas is becoming rowdy and is refusing to agree to losing its power and becoming part of the Omni Mexico, becoming part of the one big Mexico, This is going to lead to Santa Anna deciding to use military force to force Texas to, stop being a state. You're going to be part of the country of Mexico now. You're going to pay up all that you owe. You're going to pay our taxes. You're going to do all this. That's it. I'm going to make you Mexicans. You want to join us. So I'm going to do it by force to make you guys fully agree with us. No more free ride up in Texas anymore. Meanwhile, like I said, we had many people moving from the United States into Texas, taking advantage of the initial incentives that the Mexican government had offered. One of those guys is Sam Houston. Sam Houston's nickname is the Raven. That was his name in the Cherokee Nation. Oh God, what do I say about Sam Houston? Fat Electrician did a wonderful video all about the biography of Sam Houston. I'm just going to hit the highlights. Sam Houston's originally from Virginia. He'll eventually settle in Tennessee. He is a veteran of the Creek War, which really is just a fancy term for the southern feeder of the War of 1812, when the United States American Army, led by Andrew Jackson, they're going to fight. They're going to deal with various Creek forces, the Creeks eventually become part of the Muskogee tribe later on. Long story. But he was fighting against Native warriors down in Georgia, down in Alabama, that region. He actually fought at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. He got wounded. Actually, I think it was actually an arrow that hit Sam Houston. He was wounded in the chest, and that wound always festered and bothered him for the most of his adult life. His involvement in the United States Army in the Creek War led him to be a political ally of Andrew Jackson when Jackson will become president of the United States. He is also an ally of the Cherokee Nation. He is actually an adopted person of the Cherokee Nation, believe it or not. So he was known from time to time to actually be dressed in Cherokee attire. There's one point when let's just say he said some wrong words about his wife, and it turned out an accusation was false. I'd ruined his political career in Tennessee. He had been a representative, and then he was the governor of Tennessee. But the scandal of what he had, words he had said about his wife and this and that, ultimately he swallowed the bitter pill, realized he made a mistake, and he went to exile for several years, just living with the Cherokee out in Indian Territory after they'd been removed by the Jackson administration. It's crazy how he was able to be friends with both sides, and when we're having the Trail of Tears occur. Eventually, though, he will hear by the mid-1830s about, hey, Texas seems to be a pretty good place to settle. A lot of people who are downtrodden need a second chance. Great place to set up a new law practice. Great place to set up a new blacksmith. Great place to try to get into power. So Houston's one of the many guys that move into Texas, hoping to quick become a civic leader and restore his honor. When he arrives, Texas is just about to blow up. The Texas Revolution occurs in late 1835. Efforts are made to take a old cannon from a town in Texas. The town refuses. This is where that flag comes from, the come and take it flag. There it is. Yeah. The cannon didn't even work, guys. It was buried. The Mexican army hadn't used it for years. It was given for defense for the community, but Mexican forces told Texans, you have to return it. Santa Anna's rounded up all these guns to be used for the central government, for the military. Citizens don't need it anymore. Unless you're going to join the army, then you get a firearm. The Texians said, no, come and take it. Shots were fired, not too dissimilar from Lexington Concord, just on a smaller scale. Texas Revolution began. Mexican army forces that were in Texas at this time trying to keep the peace, they are overwhelmed by Texian militia. They're driven they're driven out of Texas, driven into Mexico. And quite frankly, most Texian forces celebrate, go, yeah, we really show the Mexican army, they ain't coming back. Sam Houston knew otherwise. He championed the cause for a strong military to defend Texas border. He wanted a regular army, but to get a regular army, you need funding. And at this point, Texas, we're not trying to make our own. We don't want to make our own government. We don't want that responsibility. We just want things to go back to the way they were. Houston's like, they ain't going back to the way they were. You just fired at them. You need to you need to organize a government, you need to organize funding, and you need to get me an army. It's the only way you're going to save your butts. And throughout the winter of 1835 into 1836, all sorts of different political factions are debating over, should Texas secede from Mexico? Should we seek annexation by the United States of America? Should we call for help from the Jackson administration? What are we doing here? At this time, Houston actually is sent off by the Congress that's gathering of potential rebels in Texas. He's sent north in early 1836 to parlay with various native tribes that have been raiding the Mexican frontier and try to get them from attacking Texas at this time. So he's trying to broker early peace treaties to ensure, okay, those tribes, they're not going to come into our rears and, cause more problems that we already have enough going on with Mexico itself. We don't need native tribes raiding us from our rear. When he returns, he's going to discover that the Texian militias have set up two little outposts on the San Jacinto River. One down at Goliad and one at San Antonio. The latter, of course, is the famed Alamo. Houston advises against it. He thinks he needs to have Central Army more in the eastern part of Texas. It would be a better place to defend against a Mexican counterattack. He tries to advise that to the Texian Congress. Again, congressmen gathering, debating if they're going to declare independence or not. They politely turn Houston's request down. We all know what happens next. And of course, we've talked all about the Alamo. I don't think I need to say anything more. Santa Anna does counterattack Texas. He's not going to give it up without a fight. He brings about, I've actually been thinking about the numbers in my head before tonight's stream. Probably he has about like 2,000 to 3,000 people in his own column, the left wing of the Mexican army. There's probably another 2,000 to 3,000 men under General Urea, Urrea. See, that's why I said tonight you're going to be tuned in to see how many times Readout's going to fail. It's Spanish. Urea. General Urea. I'm going General Urea. Yeah, that's what we're going to go with. General Urea. He has about 2,000 to 3,000 more soldiers. The right flank of the Mexican army. They're kind of stayed more to the Gulf of Mexico shore. Santa Anna's going over the northern Mexico ridges. He's taking in the literal rough and rocky route in winter, no less. It was a brutal overland march that Santa Anna made the Mexican army do. But they arrive at the Alamo in late February of 1836. Surprise it. The Alamo is greatly outnumbered. It holds out for 13 days. On March 6, 1836, once Santa Anna got the majority of his army around the Alamo, the majority of his artillery has finally arrived to the scene of the siege. He launches a massive assault. There are some heavy Mexican casualties. There's a few hundred Mexican casualties incurred in the assault. It didn't come without a price. But the entire garrison, 189 men, will be massacred. Now, you could argue it was in the middle of battle. How many people surrendered? What's going on in the heat of the moment? Not good to kill prisoners, but so much was going on. If this was a one-off chance, I'd say, okay, it was these were accidental deaths. Too much was going on. Oh, you know what's coming next if you know about the Texas Revolution. Massacring prisoners is not a fluke for Santa Anna. But the Alamo has fallen. At this time, Sam Houston has just recently been made the major general of a regular Texian army, and Congress of Representatives for Texas have voted in favor of declaring independence from Mexico. And they rapidly organize a Texas Republic. So we got a new country made, but one of their two defenses have fallen, and now the road is wide open for invasion of this new republic. And well, after half an hour in, now we're officially catching up to the story of the Battle of San Jacinto. Yeah, I gotta warn you, I'm a screamer. We're quoting Davy Crockett as portrayed by Billy Bob Thornton in the Alamo, the 2004 Alamo, which is really good. It is actually, I'd say, the best cinematic depiction of the Alamo. I know our chat disagrees with me. I know there is controversy on that one. Everybody has a soft spot for the 1960 John Wayne, the Alamo. I watched it. I'm going to be honest, I was bored. And that's the worst thing I can say about the 1960 Alamo. It's like, I'm not worried about the inaccuracies. I want the big set pieces. I want the action. I'm ready. This is a 1960s Western. But like half of the movie is just talking and not even interesting talking. You want interesting talking, you can watch the 2004 Alamo. There's a lot of interesting dialogue in that, but not in the John Wayne one. I'm sorry. Yep, Dennis Quaid plays Sam Houston. And you know what I like about the Alamo 2004? It doesn't end at the Alamo. It ends at San Jacinto. It actually shows you what happened after. Because I think a lot of people do not know the they know about the Alamo in a vacuum. They don't understand its importance to the Texas Revolution and the wider course of North American history because they don't know what happens in the weeks after. And this is why I was so excited to talk about this battle on a live stream. I think what Sam Houston, now appointed as Major General of the Texian Army, is going to do is one of the greatest military operations in U.S. military history. Yeah, technically he's not operating for the United States of America. He's operating for the Republic of Texas, but just let's be honest, like over 75% of these Texians were American citizens that had relocated into Texas and eventually would become American citizens again by the end of it. So I think it counts. Oh, and by the way, there will be U.S. soldiers involved in this campaign. There's reasons for it. I can't talk about all of them because I don't have the full confirmation of what was happening. So March 2nd, Texas declares independence. March 6th, the Alamo falls. And keep in mind, there is another massive Mexican army. The right wing of Santa Anna's invasion is moving up the Gulf of Mexico. So that's getting near Goliad. March 13th, Sam Houston, who's been trying to organize an army in Gonzales, well, he's really sent out to take charge of a growing group of regular soldiers and volunteers. He gets word the Alamo's fallen. Houston immediately orders for Gonzales evacuated, and the Texian army begins to fall back to the east. We only have probably about 300 or 400 Texian soldiers at this point. And you will notice in this presentation, I will say Texian, not Texan, or the reason is it's a lot of the earlier spelling and terminology is Texian. Texan gets shorted from people mispronouncing Texian, and then it became Texan, Tehin. So a lot of the texts I've read tonight, most namely when you read Free Roads to the Alamo by Mr. William C. Davis. I more read that for the Alamo stream, but I did brush up on it. And portions of Brian Kilmeade's book on Sam Houston, it will say it as Texian. And I've just gotten used to, if I'm referring to Texas during the Revolution, I refer to them as Texians. I could be 100% wrong, and I'm sure somebody will let me know, but I will be calling them Texians for the night. So the Texian army begins to fall back. It's about 300 or 400 strong. Cannot fight Santa Anna's force. Even with the losses Santa Anna suffered at the Alamo, it still far outweighs Houston. Houston wants to put as much water and land between him and Santa Anna until he can get a large enough force and find an ideal location to do battle. The Texian government will abandon Washington on the broad. Trying to quote, we're going to quote Full Metal Jacket. Oh, God. So the Texian government, they will abandon their capital, which was Washington on the Brazos River. That'll happen on March 17th. And then the right flank, General Uriah's flank, is going to cross the San Antonio River. It is going to threaten the fortifications at Goliad. There's a lot of controversy as to what Colonel Fannin, the Texian commander of Goliad, was trying to do. Initially, he had been requested by William Travis to go and reinforce the Alamo. He walks out for a day, a wagon breaks down, and Fannin gives up the reinforcement effort, falls back to Goliad. Then he gets repeated orders from Houston. The Alamo's fallen. Get out of Goliad. You got to come up and link up with me. You're not going to stop the Mexican army in that little fort down there. And, well, Fannin, he hesitates. There's a debate over, was he feeling guilty for not being able to assist the Alamo in time, and now he wants to make a last stand? Is it because he's having rolling motive power problems. What I mean is he's having wagon problems to get everybody out. There's a lot of back and forth and uncertainty as to what really delayed Fannin. He does a those are those are words, Books and Battlefields. Those are words. Don't know what those words are, but those are words. So eventually, Fannin does withdraw from Goliad, but it's too late. A few days out into his march to withdraw from Goliad, General Rhea's vanguard catches up with him. Fannin will fortify in the middle of a prairie. It's not the ideal location, but he feels like he can't go any further. So he has the wagons overturned. They form a square in the middle of this prairie, and they hold out throughout March of 19th into the morning of the 20th. But it becomes apparent that there's well over 1,000 Mexican soldiers surrounding only a few hundred Texian soldiers. They will agree to surrender. General Rhea will offer terms of surrender to Fannin. Fannin is more than happy to comply. They're taken back to Goliad and held as prisoner. Santa Anna gets wind of this, and Santa Anna insists that no prisoners are to be taken, that Texians are to be viewed as land pirates, and the only treatment for piracy is death. I've heard some say that General Rhea was not at Goliad at this point when this message was delivered. I don't know how true that is or not, but by the end of March 1836, 400 prisoners of war that the Mexican army had taken at the Battle of Toledo will be massacred. This is why I said in isolation, the deaths at the Alamo, the high loss that the Texians suffered, maybe you could argue, not good to kill prisoners, but there was so much going on. Who could hear who was surrendering? Yeah, this is the point where there's no excuses for what the Mexican army and Santa Anna have done. We now have two massacres on our hands, the Alamo and Goliad. Goliad being far larger in scale than the Alamo, actually. And really, at that point, Houston just lost several hundred soldiers that could help him out. So Houston will continue the withdrawal. But notice, after speaking about all of this, guess who was not moved until March 29th? That would be Santa Anna. For reasons that vary, some of it has to do with potential plundering of the Alamo mission. You could also say it's because the wing of the army that Santa Anna commanded was too badly exhausted from their forced march up from Mexico, and they needed a few weeks of break from fighting and marching. It's very possible. I'm not going to lie to you. I have that lisp that, the THs and the Fs and the Ds, they all blur. Like I can't say the free zero. I can't say 30 correctly. So I would admit that. But thank you for tuning in. Norf's Auto Reviews. Thank you for tuning in tonight. And if you're joining our live virtual battle walk, we'll get to the battle walk. Be sure to hit that like button. Let the TubeU algorithm, let Elon Musk's lovely X, formerly known as Twitter, and let Rumble, the green button, know that you do want to be edumericated through their social media platforms. Consider hitting that like button as we talk about the final phases of the Texas Revolution leading to the Battle of San Jacinto. Santa Anna does not evacuate San Antonio until March 29th. Why did Texans hate Santa Anna so much? Hail, Redoubt Productions. It may have to do with the fact that under the command of Santa Anna, not one, but two forces of the Texan army were not only defeated in battle, but were massacred. And whereas the Alamo could be seen as a defiant last stand and nobody refused to surrender, everybody was killed. We have eyewitness testimonies that differ, that there are some that claim there were prisoners taken at the end of the Alamo, and some even say Davy Crockett was amongst those prisoners, and that the next day, or the morning, once sun came up, they were executed by order of Santa Anna. And if not for the Alamo, the Goliad massacre, where 400 prisoners of war were marched out of the fort and executed by firing squad, even though they had surrendered a few days earlier. That may be why Texas really does not like Santa Anna, and why maybe there's still a lot of difficult relations between the border states of like Texas and New Mexico and Arizona with the northern half of Mexico. It's just a crapshoot idea. But thank you for tuning in, Garrison. Thank you for that $9.99 to support this historical bastion or historical bastion of historical preservation. I can't even get my names right anymore, my nicknames and slogans. I got to play the $10, but I can't find it because StreamYards changed their layouts again, and driving me into complete insanity. There it is.
$10, a lot of money.
There, we played the clip. All is right with the world. Finally brought my review channel to life today. Ooh, like reviewing books, movies. The Bottomless Pit has arrived. Howdy. Andrew has arrived. Good evening. Welcome to our virtual battle walk where we discuss the importance of the Battle of San Jacinto. Yep, I do. Oh, you're talking about. Oh, okay, you're talking about that channel. Understood. And with that being said, let's move forward. So Santa Anna is going to finally advance out of San Antonio in pursuit of Houston, but not until the end of March 1836. That gives Sam Houston several weeks to get his small army across a couple rivers, get him out of harm's way, sound the alarm that the Mexican army is invading eastern Texas, because now we're getting into the heavily populated portion of Texas at this point. And, well, I don't have enough time to talk about everybody in both armies, but there are a couple key players I just want to recognize that they are key to Texian survival or success. And like I said, yes, it's all going to be spelled Texian, not Texan. There's a reason to it. Certain sources I've read refer to Texans with an I sometimes at this time period. The Texan that we know today really doesn't come about till after the revolution is over. So if you want to know why I keep using Texian and not Texan, that's why. I know it's not foolproof. I know there's sources that just say Texan, but there's some that say Texian. So I just thought I'd just keep it as a nifty little thing. You don't hear Texian enough. And it's kind of fun to say Texian too. So I'm sure somebody will get angry about me doing that and say how I'm wrong. But like I said, I see it referenced as Texian in William C. Davis's book. I've seen it referenced in portions of Brian Kilmeade's book. And I've seen it referenced in several other historical articles that I've read about the Texas Revolution. So left to right, there we have Mr. Deaf Smith. He would be a scout for Sam Houston's army during what they call the runaway scrape, where you have Houston's army falling back through Texas, and you have all sorts of chaos going on because, hey, it's being invaded, two Mexican armies. Civilians are trying to get the heck out of Dodge. They're trying to get to the very eastern edges of Texas, or even, heck, get into Louisiana, get into the United States, get out of the way. So there's a lot of people taking flight, a lot of uncertainty. But through that uncertainty, Dev Smith is going to be one of Houston's most important scouts, doing reconnaissance of the Mexican advance, trying to keep tabs on where Santa Anna is at all times, so Houston knows. And he has actually become very important into gaining some vital intelligence for Houston and the Texian army. Now, because of Houston retreating for several weeks across Texas, initially everybody's okay with it. Everybody's like, okay, Houston's going off. He's going to find good ground. And then the retreat keeps going. And people start getting upset. Soldiers and politicians alike. When's Houston going to turn and stop Santa Anna? Because Santa Anna is getting closer and closer to the homes and civilians of Texas. So Houston publicly starts losing a lot of support, especially in the new Republic of Texas government. He has a lot of heated words between himself and the interim president, President Burnett. One of the few politicians in the Republic that will align with Houston and kind of ride or die with what he's doing is Thomas Jefferson Rusk. Thomas Jefferson Rusk, I have a little right up here yet, but I have notes. I always have notes. Where are we at? There we are. Thomas Jefferson Rusk, he's acting as the Secretary of War for the interim Texas Republic, and he's going to try his best to defend Houston from any criticism, the mounting criticism as they get deeper and deeper into Texas. And you have to remember, what's interesting is you would think people are running away from Houston's army, that they don't want to be involved in the war, that we're in an alarm. We've lost both our forts on the San Jacinto River, all is lost. It's actually the opposite. More people are now drawn toward volunteering or even enlisting as a regular soldier in the Texian army now. After the fall of the Alamo, after the massacre of Goliad, they want revenge for the death of Texians. The problem was they didn't get why Houston wouldn't use all that pent up desire for revenge and turn against Santa Anna immediately. Houston is way more patient than the Texas Republic wanted to give him credit for. And he was plotting something, as you're going to see. And there's one other individual that I want to bring out. That's Juan Seguin. Juan Seguin, he is a Tejano by birth, so he is born in northern Mexico. He lives most of his life around San Antonio. He is actually going to be the mayor of San Antonio before the Texas Revolution, believe it or not. And he would organize a group of, they're kind of like mounted troops. There were sometimes they're labeled as cavalry, sometimes they're infantry. They were mounted troops, volunteers from the San Antonio area. He had good relations with men like Davy Crockett, men like Jim Bowie. He had good relations with some of the defenders of the Alamo, and most of his force was actually in the Alamo. Seguin was detached as a courier. He was sent with about 20 of his volunteers from the Alamo before it fell to deliver a message to Houston. And he's one of the few survivors of the volunteer company to organize a few months ago. He's going to be very important for Houston and the Texian army, especially, I hate to say this, as a public image, to show that it wasn't just a bunch of Americans coming in to grab land from Mexico, that there is a lot of internal struggle as part of the Texas Revolution, that there are native-born Texians, Tejanos, that have Mexican and even Spanish ancestry that are fed up with the Mexican Central Republic. That's why they're siding with Texas. So having Seguin on your side was very important. I hate to say it from a public relations, but it was. And I know both, and Seguin knew it too. And he would remind Houston of that during his campaign. You want me at your front lines because it looks good. Sorry. And I'm also one of your best scouts too. So, but with that said, where is Sam Houston going? He has a growing army, but it's in with retreat. And this army wants one thing, and it wants blood. But Houston, he knows he can't command a bloodthirsty army in the battlefield. It'll just quickly become a rabble, disorganized. He won't be able to maximize their firepower against the Mexican army. And the Mexican army, while I would say there's probably better individual soldiers amongst the Texian army. And Sam Houston's a perfect example of this. The Mexican army is just numerically superior. And I would probably argue they probably have better discipline at this time than the Texian army. Far better. Santa Anna, for all his faults. Oh, he's a disciplinarian, all right. He's a tough son of a gun. So this goes on until mid-April. Houston's going deeper and deeper into eastern Texas. It looks like at one point he starts veering to the north like he's going to the Sabine River. Looks like he's going to the border of the United States of America. And Santa Anna got to be a little careful about that, because if Houston does go near the United States, that may provoke U.S. intervention. Santa Anna doesn't know that for certain, of course, but Santa Anna has to keep that in mind that, hey, this may turn into more than just suppressing a rebellion. Now I may be fighting another regional power, and I really don't want that. Eventually, Santa Anna is going to get intelligence that the Republic of Texas government has relocated to Harrisburg, Texas, and he has a decision to make. I can keep going toward the northeast in the direction of Houston and hunt him down, or I'm a few days march from the Texas government. I could bag the whole lot of them, and if I get the whole government, this rebellion's over. There is no independent Texas at this point, and I can make a statement out of them. You can imagine what statement that is. So Santa Anna decides to pivot and chases the Texian government at Harrisburg. They get wind of this, the Texas government, and they hightail it out of Harrisburg. And it gets really close. It is said that, and I couldn't find I find conflicting dates on this. I just couldn't make piecemeals, but it's somewhere before April 19th, 1836. President Burnett is boarding a riverboat in New Washington, which is right on the shore at the Gulf of Mexico, when the vanguard of Santa Anna's column appears. And this would have been led by a Juan Almonte, who we'll talk a bit more about in a moment. They hold their fire, though. They were within gunshot. The Mexicans claim they were within gunshot of President Burnett and the riverboat with a few other dignitaries. They withheld their fire because the wives of President Burnett and other politicians were also in view. So out of courtesy, they did not shoot at the Texas government. That's how close it got. So Santa Anna's pivot almost worked, but ultimately it did not. The Texas government slips away to live to administrate another day. Meanwhile, Houston starts noticing that the Mexican army is not on my tail anymore. On April 16th, at a particularly knotty tree that sat at the fork in a road, it is said that Houston asked somebody, so which way to the fight? Which way to Harrisburg? I don't know. I'm butchering this famous moment of Texas lore. I got the whole state of Texas coming to kill me right now. I don't feel safe. On April 16th, we don't know fully why. Either he had a rough hunch of what had happened, or he had gathered intelligence and knew precisely what happened. At a fork in the road, instead of continuing toward the northeast to the Sabine River, he will make a hard right at the fork in the road to Harrisburg. Everybody began cheering because they knew that meant they were going back toward the enemy and that they were finally going to see a battle. And this is why I will say, the runaway scrape was all planned by Sam Houston. There may not be a lot of written paperwork that it was, but the way it's laid out reminds me a lot of the great race to the Dan River during the American Revolution. When, when you have these forces in North and South Carolina. And I am so embarrassed to say, I can't remember. I think Nathaniel Greene took charge, if I'm not mistaken. I think this was after Cowpens. Was the race of the day and after Cowpens, and Greene had replaced Daniel Morgan, and they fall back, and Cornwallis gives chase the whole way to the Dan River, and then Greene's able to resupply, and then able to move back in, and that's what leads to the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. I think that's where the timeline adds up. I could be 100% mistaken, and maybe it's Daniel Morgan, and he did it before Cowpens, but I think the race of the Dan across North, well, it would have to be because it's North Carolina. My point is there's a precedent for this, and I'm pretty darn positive Sam Houston knew the precedent as well. And I think that is what he's doing as well. It was Nathaniel Greene's army. My brain worked in the end. So there's precedent for this in American military history. And not to mention, he has operated with Andrew Jackson in the battlefield before during the War of 1812. He's very likely familiar with certain tactics that Jackson also employed in the Creek War. This whole idea that you feign a retreat, a lot of that's indigenous tactics, that you feign a retreat and lure your enemy into attack. That's guerrilla warfare tactics right there. So I say the runaway scrape, while it looked like chaos, all part of the plan. It made Santa Anna believe that he had the enemy on the run, that they were disorganized, that it's just a matter of days, and actually convinced him, you know what? I don't have to go after them right now. I can break off and have my cake and pie at the same time. I'll take out the government and then I'll come back and finish off Houston. Not a good idea. Not a good idea for Santa Anna. He was lured into a trap. So that's why I think this campaign is so important to talk about, especially if you're a military historian. There's other examples of these Fabian style tactics. Of course, George Washington is known to do them, but I think Sam Houston does it most viciously of everybody, at least in North American history. So before we continue, I want to mention when Santa Anna realizes he's not bagging the Texan army, he gets word, hey, Houston's moving toward he's coming from the west. Santa Anna decides we need to cut him off. We can't let him link up with the Texas government again. So we're going to go toward Lynch's Ferry, which is to the east of modern day Houston, Texas. Oh, I wonder why it's called Houston, Texas. Houston is making for Lynch's Ferry because he wants to make sure Santa Anna can't get out of a peninsula and cannot continue his pursuit of the government. So we're into a race for Lynch's Ferry. And I want to mention at this time people that are key to Mexican success or survival, depending on how this battle goes. Martin Perfecto de Cos, he was one of Santa Anna's most loyal officers. He had actually surrendered Goliad in 1835 when the Texas Revolution began. And the Texans were furious when they hear de Cos was amongst the ranks of those besieging the Alamo, because they're like, hey, no, you agreed to surrender to us. You surrendered Goliad to us. You left Texas. You went back to Mexico, never to return. That's what an honorable soldier does, right? A man of their word. And de Cos is like, well, Santa Anna's a dictator. Can't. So de Cos is back. He led one of the assault columns on the Alamo, and now he is rushing to reinforce Santa Anna. Santa Anna is moving so fast, guys, that the deeper he gets into Texas, the more he breaks away from the army. The more he breaks off and picks smaller groups of men to go with him. So when I say Santa Anna is going to Lynch's Ferry, I mean only about 700 or 800 men are going with him at this point. De Cos with 500 men is a few days march behind him. And I'm sure there's several other portions of a baggage train going across Mexico. This may sound familiar to General Edward Braddock in 1755 when he tried to assault Fort Duquesne in western Pennsylvania during the French-Indian War. The deeper he got into North America, the more he had to isolate and break apart his army so he could keep to a schedule. It did not end well for General Braddock, did it? No, the battle he's a part of is literally named Braddock's Defeat. And I did a 3-part video all about that last year. A man of their word. This is war. Someone's going to be betray your trust. Yeah, hey, it was a different time, Michael. That's the only thing I can explain. The honor system was very important back then. Chivalry, it's gone nowadays. Chivalry does not exist anymore. I'd kind of argue it may have died with the American Civil War. I'd argue chivalry probably died with the Great War. It's a trap. Now, in the middle, you have Juan Almonte. I mentioned him earlier. He's actually the guy leading the vanguard of Santa Anna's detachment, the ones that they got within musket range of the Texian government before they boarded that riverboat. And he has a fascinating backstory. He's well educated. He speaks multiple languages. He's fluent in English. He's fluent in Spanish, of course, but I think he has a few other languages under his belt. And he's actually been used as an ambassador by the various Mexican governments over the years as ambassadors to Europe to talk with the Spanish Empire and a few other ones. So, and he will keep popping up even after the Texas Revolution. He has a very long life. And actually, in the end, he actually sided with the French forces that tried to set up an empire in Mexico in the 1860s, believe it or not. Yeah, he's a fascinating guy, but he's somebody you want, especially Santa Anna, who, let's just be honest, may not be the wisest as politics. You may want Almonte to have you, especially to get you out of trouble. Smooth talker he is. And then you have Manuel Castrillon. I found that he could have been from Cuba or Mexico or Spain. Nobody's really certain where he came from. The thing is, he had a imposing presence on the battlefield. Like, this was he was a well-chiseled man. take that as what you will. It's from I've gathered pictures. He was always freaking pure. He always had the best attire out. He was the ideal general in the Mexican army, at least by visuals. He's one of Santa Anna's most trusted officers, but he often butts heads with Santa Anna. He often conflicts with his orders, questions them, but at the end of the day, he does them because he's his friend, and Santa Anna's a dictator and very scary. So he will do whatever Santa Anna says. He also had friends. It seems like when I know Castrillon was out in Texas in the late 1820s when rebellion, like there was signs that there were financial issues, that Texas wasn't paying their dues or following the full law. He seemed to have been stationed out in Texas, and he actually made friends with a couple Texans, believe it or not, several Texians. And that will come back to the end, at the end of our story. Keep that in mind. So he is friendly with some of the Texians, even though he's at war with them. And at last, an hour into our stream, we get to San Jacinto battlefield itself. Castrillon. I appreciate you attempting to edumericate me on the Spanish language books. Your efforts are futile, but I appreciate it that it is in the comment section so people can know I tried and our chat helped. They're trying to ensure I will not be eviscerated in the comment section. Castellon. I will be helping out at the Ligonier Valley Railroad Museum May 3rd. It'll be Sunday, next Sunday. It's free museum day for museums in the Ligonier Valley region of Pennsylvania. So if you happen to be a day's drive, consider stopping by. I'll be at the Railroad Museum, but there's 6 different museums. I think it's 6 that'll be open for free admission, so be sure to see them all. And then you can play the stream to them tomorrow, and then they're going to cringe and laugh, but you'll give them good humor. You will make their day by playing a stream, because they're like, who the hell is this schmuck? So before we go down, I want to give you a video of an overview how these armies approach the battlefield. So to the left, there's a map that's provided by the San Jacinto Museum of Battlefield. To the right, lovely Google Maps. In the yellow circle is the location of Lynch's Ferry. That is what's drawing both sides to this future battlefield. They want control over the ferry. Whoever controls the ferry means they're going to cut off one of 2 escape routes out of this peninsula. The other escape route is not on the map. It's about 8 miles west of both guys. That would have been Vince's Bridge over a marshy area, and we'll get back to that. And I forgot to mention, Houston knew by April 18th precisely what Santa Anna was doing. And he was going after the Texas government. And then at least for a few days, he was going to be around the Harrisburg, New Washington area because Deaf Smith and his scouts actually captured a Mexican courier. And if you believe the legend, the correspondence that was in the saddlebag, that saddlebag was marked WBT. And if you know about the Alamo, you know what that may mean. That's all the more I'll say on that, because it's more of a legend than fact. But Smith, that's why I mentioned earlier when Smith was going to provide vital intelligence for Houston. This essentially confirmed to Houston exactly where Santa Anna was going to be for the next couple days. So he quickly moved. And actually, April 18th, they're going to get a hot meal. Or no, April 19th, they're going to get a hot meal early morning, April 19th. They had procured a couple extra flour sacks, flour stores. So they're able to have a bit of more bigger meal, and it's dough cakes. But the Texians get some food in them, which is very important because they're forced marching all the way to the east of Harrisburg. They're marching all the way toward Lynch's Ferry. They march for the night mostly, and that will allow them to win the race. So they got that early morning meal on the 19th. They're able to march the whole day for the 19th into the early morning hours of the 20th. They will arrive at Lynch's Ferry the morning of April 20th. That's about 3 hours before the first Mexican sentries start appearing out on the prairie to the south of Lynch's Ferry. So that's why Houston wins the race. He was able to just get that many more miles out of his men, more than Santa Anna. The blue arrows notes the rough direction that the Texian army makes onto the battlefield. The red arrow indicates the Mexicans starting to move their way onto the battlefield. And you'll notice from the Google aerial map that the battlefield has changed considerably. It is parts of it are preserved as a park. There's a very well-known monument in the middle. It's the is it like the tall? It's the taller than the Washington Monument. It's the it's like one. I think it is the single tallest monument in all of the United States of America, at least as a tower monument. But unfortunately, a lot of it has been lost to the fact that, hey, they're about to fight at a confluence. You got the Buffalo Bayou coming off to the west side of the maps, emptying into the San Jacinto River. So that's where the name San Jacinto comes from. It's the name of the river that the battle occurred along. And it's very marshy here. They've opened the rivers over the years to turn them into shipping channels so ships can get closer to the Houston area. So the lay of the rivers has changed somewhat. There's a lot of bog land around the battlefield too. So it's not, well, you can kind of see it's there, but you can definitely see the defining line of where preserved battlefield ends and swamp land begins. In the United States. It's taller than the Washington Monument. It is taller than the Washington Monument, and I believe it is the tallest tower monument in the United States of America. I wouldn't advise climbing it, but they have an elevator, from what I've been told. Yeah, you can go to the top of it. There's an observation. I don't think you can go out on a deck. It's not like going on the Perry Peace Monument. This is more like you're in windows looking down. You want the numbers? I'll give you the numbers. Okay, I'm going to good old Wikipedia. The San Jacinto Monument is 567 feet tall. It's a column located in the Houston Shipping Channel. It's about 16 miles east of downtown Houston. Yep. It is the world's tallest masonry column. It is 12 feet taller than the Washington Monument. It is the tallest stone monument in the world. Granted, that is Wikipedia saying it. Yeah, those are the wiki digits. Yeah, you can. Yeah, I know that got me some thumbs down. I know I broke my rule, but it's the first thing that appeared, guys. Alrighty, and this is where we finally get. I want to say this is a virtual battle walk. So now we talked all about what's going into this meetup between the big battle between Houston and Santa Ana. Let's see the battlefield itself. Now, I want to stress again. I'm not saying this is exactly how Santa Ana and Houston and the Mexicans and the Texians saw it in 1836. I'm fully aware of that. There's the giant monument. Obviously, that was not there. And I'm sure it makes for fun times for tour guides here at this site trying to interpret it. Because I'm sure there's so many people, well, why didn't they just put guns in the monument? You know somebody's asked that. You know. But up to the top, you'd be standing roughly at the very front of where the Mexicans are going to encamp, or the Mexican army will encamp. So I'm looking toward the northwest, toward the Buffalo Bayou. And yeah, it's very hard to see in that top image. And that's kind of intentional why it shows that. It shows you the topography. It shows you the vegetation of the battlefield. It's a prairie, but there's woodlots of oak all throughout the prairie. And actually, right about where the monument sits today, there's a slight ridgeline. The Texian army is beyond that ridgeline. And if we're looking from the Texian perspective, we're looking toward the southeast, toward the San Jacinto River, beyond the monument. You may even see the foot of the monument, that tree line. That's kind of denoting where that low ridgeline is. It's masking where the Mexican army is. So you can see why, although these forces get really close to each other on April 20th, there's no significant battle, but there is fighting still on April 20th. San Jacinto, believe it or not, is actually a multi-day event. Everybody says it's a one battle that happens in only a few minutes. This was actually a multi-day event, which I did not know about till I started reading about it. So, as I mentioned, the Texian army arrives on the scene morning of April 20th. The lead elements of the Mexican army start arriving and started scouting around Lynch's Ferry. They quickly realize, oh, there's definitely Texians guarding the ferry because there are not one, but two Texian cannons, 6-pound cast iron pieces called the Twin Sisters, donated to the Republic of Texas from like-minded individuals living in Cincinnati, Ohio, believe it or not. These two 6-pounders will open fire on the Mexican scouts that the Texians can see on that ridge line. At that moment, the Mexican vanguard, they're going to call up reinforcements, which is a lone cannon, a lone bronze cannon. Some say it was a 9-pounder, some say it was a 12-pounder. It shows you how little of Santa Anna's army is all together here on April 20th. He only has about 700 guys. They only got one artillery piece. The rest of the artillery is at the rear of the train, miles away. That rolls up into the prairie and starts firing in the direction where the Twin Sisters were. The Twin Sisters pull back into the tree line. And at that moment, a gentleman by the name of Colonel Sidney Sherman. Sidney Sherman has joined. Well, Sidney Sherman. Can't speak for a moment. Brain fried. You need more of the thinking juice. This is the last of the Glades Pike Red, which my family got as a Christmas present. And I appreciate it. So made it last to April. I figure red wine, good way to go out. It's a good way to finish a bottle out talking about San Jacinto. I don't know actually, Books and Battlefield, if he is directly related to William Tecumseh Sherman. I did not get time to look that up. I know that Sidney Sherman comes from Massachusetts, believe it or not. That's where his ancestry is. Definitely a sweet. It's definitely on the sweeter side. So Sidney Sherman, he joined Sidney Sherman's fascinated. So he's a entrepreneur in the cotton industry. He moved to Kentucky, had a big business there, especially for machinery that picked apart the cotton plant, the fibers from the plant. He had a whole machinery set up for it. He'll sell his interest when he hears word about the Texas Revolution. So he actually wants to go to Texas because of the revolution. So yeah, here's somebody who sees an opportunity in chaos. He joins in. He joins the Texan army right as the runaway scrape begins, and he is eager to avenge the Alamo. He is eager to fight the Mexicans, and he eventually, on April 20th, he sees what's going on here, sees that Mexican gun out there in the prairie, and he goes up to Houston directly and is like, can I go take that gun? No, you're going to stay in the tree line. You're not going to let anybody know that we're here. We got the Alamo surprise. Well, maybe we need a reconnaissance at least. Maybe, could you send me out to reconnoiter what's going on beyond that ridge line? All right. Yep. I'll let you go. So Sherman takes about 80 guys to go on this reconnaissance. And well, by the time they run pale mail toward where the gun was, by the time they've gotten order to reconnoiter the enemy, they get out to the position where the cannon was. The cannon's being pulled back. And by that point, a group of Mexican lancers have arrived, and the two just smash into each other. At one point, Thomas Jefferson Rusk, who was part of Sherman's reconnaissance, he falls off his horse and almost gets captured. The Secretary of War for the Texas Republic almost gets captured April 20th, 1836. But timely arrival of a gentleman by the name of, I got to pronounce, if I can pronounce this right, and I do have to say because he is very important to Marabou Lamar, who's with the Texian cavalry. He'll pull Rusk off the ground and get him to safety. He's very important to Texas history because he will go on to become the second president of second full-term president of the Texas Republic. Technically, President Burnett this time, he's not considered an official president. He's an interim president. That's a whole mess for another day. But yeah, the guy who saves Rusk during this failed reconnaissance, he goes on to becomes the only other Texas president. Or no, the only other. Gosh, Texas Republic is confusing. He's important. And here is the approximate location of where this skirmish occurred between Sherman's reconnaissance force and his Mexican lancers. It's denoted, you can see a little red dot on the map from Google. You could then see what then dot notes. I will be honest, I have pulled images from historical marker database. The photos of these small little granite markers are from Brian Anderson that I pulled, so he has full credit to those photographs. I just happened to pull them for this presentation. Go support historical marker database. I've actually used that for a number of, I'm going to say, starting ideas for videos. Look around on the map. Wow, there's a lot of monuments here. What's going on here? And then it begins. And at this point, this brings up what's really cool if you get to visit San Jacinto battlefield and why I want to go visit. It's not just the giant tower in the middle of the monument. There are about 20 of these granite monuments around the battlefield, and they're not big. They're not massive, but they denote the approximate location of key events during the battle. So the story behind these markers is that amongst the ranks of the Texian army was a 19-year-old lad by the name of James Washington Winters. He and his two brothers had enlisted with the Texas Army, and all three of them would fight at the Battle of San Jacinto. One of his brothers will actually get wounded, but young James Washington Winters would survive, go on to have a fruitful life. He was a blacksmith's apprentice before the war. He did a bunch of different stuff after the war. And well, he was one of the last surviving members of the Texian army come the turn of the 20th century. And the Daughters of the Texas Revolution, yes, there's a Daughters of the Texas Revolution, because why wouldn't there be? You had Daughters of the American Revolution. Actually, you have Daughters of the Texas Revolution. They were looking to monumentize the San Jacinto battlefield, and they recruited Mr. Winters. Another good question. I don't know. I don't think because these guys were already in Texas. They'd already migrated to Texas from Tennessee, maybe distant. But Dick Winters, of course, I know he's from Pennsylvania. Going up the tree. So I'd have to do more research on that, but I don't think a direct relation. It'd be cool if there was. So Mr. Winters, now as an older man, he would go out with the Daughters of the Texas Revolution, and then to the best of his memories, mark out where he remembered key events happening. And initially they were marked with crosses on the battlefield. Now they're marked with granite monuments that were put there by the I was about to say DAR. DTR. Oh, DTR. You don't get to say DTR all the time. And there's about 20s around the battlefield. They're kind of like flank markers at Gettysburg. That's about the size they look like. And now the San Jacinto Battlefield and Museum Association, they've come out and said, hey, just keep in mind, this is from the recollections of one man. There were hundreds of guys out here fighting, and the battle was very quick. So take these with a pinch of salt. These are all proximate, but it's cool to see, nevertheless, that this is how one veteran of the Texian army recalls where these events happen. So I think that's really neat. And these weren't just arbitrarily placed. No, this was from one man's recollections. And we'll be looking at a few of them before this virtual battle walk is over. So, night of April 20th, Santa Anna himself arrives, the rear of his contingent, the Mexican army. They're hoping to be reinforced. Santa Anna's getting worried when he gets reports that, hey, we saw 2 Texian cannons. I thought they threw their cannons in the river. Well, they got 2 cannons, sir. How many are there? I can't tell, sir. Santa Anna fears that he is outnumbered and actually will dig in the night of April 20th toward the San Jacinto River shore. His back is actually toward a small body of water, which is now known as Peggy's Lake. It is not a good position. I'm going to be quite honest. I don't know why he fortifies where he does. I guess it was a lack of options and thinking that the only Texians he's encountered thus far are a vanguard of Houston's army, and that maybe he's still in position to threaten Lynch's Ferry. He's not aware that the full Texian army is just a few rods over that ridgeline in the trees. So they dig in, and he has them up all night. They're digging in, they're overturning any wagons they have to make a breastwork just to the southeast of the ridgeline. He's clearly alarmed, And this is going to exhaust his men. They're up all night on sentry duty. Come morning light, they haven't slept at all. The good news for Santa Ana is that General Cuss has arrived with 500 reinforcements. So Sam Houston actually had the numerical advantage at San Jacinto on April 20th. He loses the numerical advantage waiting overnight. And by April 21st, it's still close from what I've seen. I've seen different numbers thrown around. I think Sam Houston has about 800 or 900 guys at this point in the Texian army. Santa Ana, with these reinforcements, seems to just hike over 1,000 to 1,100 men, but sources vary. It's hard to tell. And all morning, nothing happens. Texian army sits in camp. They're waiting around for orders. Santa Ana's waiting around for a morning attack. Nothing happens. The only thing that really happens in the morning, Houston orders Smith to go to Vince's bridge and destroy it to prevent anybody from escaping. So this indicates that Houston is planning the fight, but he's waiting. And then it's going to be around like 3:30 in the afternoon. So we're getting to mid-afternoon now. We're burning daylight here. The Mexican army starts to take a siesta. I'm not even saying that as being an exaggeration. At this point, Santa Ana orders a siesta. He decides, okay, it's 3 o'clock. Nothing's happening. We're going to lose daylight here soon. Guys, take a break. Yeah, we've been running around like crazy across Texas the past few weeks. Take a break. So most of the Mexican army by mid-afternoon, April 21st, is sleeping. It is at that moment. It just seems so weird. Houston's kind of just like poking and prodding, or like at the same time, some men just asking privates randomly, like, so you feel like you can fight today? Hell yeah. That's why we're here, Sam. That's why we followed you this whole way. All right. You want to fight? Yep. We want to fight. All right. Let's fight. That's like how nonchalant it seems Sam Houston's decision to attack is. Again, I think he knew he was attacking on April 21st. I think this is all planned out, but it was just kind of him waiting patiently, just waiting for the moment to be right. This is going to give you a bit of a perspective of where the Texian camp was located. Again, all right, I don't think those power lines were there in 1836. And again, this would have been largely concealed by oak and tall grass. And the Buffalo Bayou is just beyond the horizon behind those trees. There's a monument in the encampment that commemorates the twin sisters being donated by Ohioans to the Texian cause. Those are reproduced barrels based upon the originals. And of course, there's Mr. Winter's marker denoting one of the encampments that would have been out there. At 3:30, they begin organizing. Houston is said to give the mother of all motivational speeches, which I can't do justice, but what was likely said at that speech. Remember the Alamo. Remember Goliad. Yes, this is where probably the most famous battle cry of American history is uttered. Again, technically not American history, it's Texas history, but it becomes an American state, so it counts. But it's here, it's at San Jacinto. The Alamo, everybody knows about the Alamo because remember the Alamo, but it's actually uttered here. And here we are, we're going to go down the battle line. We're not going to see every different unit. I'm just going to show you a handful. They step off from their encampments around 4:30. They're in a single battle line. I should have put a map up to show you guys, but it's really basic. It is a single battle line. The Texian backs are to the Buffalo Bayou. You would have on the very left flank a group of what they would call Sherman's regiment, which was Sidney Sherman's regiment that he commanded the Battle of San Jacinto, is a mixture of volunteers. This is where Mr. Winters was actually located during the Battle of San Jacinto, so this would have been the closest he had a perspective of. You can see the red dot in the distance denoting his approximate marker. Sherman's advance, and this is just due to the topography, he actually had an advance much further closer to the Mexican line than the rest of the Texans did. There's also there a battle flag, as you can see. That is a photo of the real battle flag confirmed to have been carried by the Newport Rifles, a company organized by Sidney Sherman when he left Kentucky, about 50 Kentuckian volunteers to join the Texian cause. The flag was sewn by Sherman's wife. It was painted by another individual. It still survives today. It is hung in the Texas House of Representatives, which is as we should. Well, there's part of me that says we need to put more battle flags in our places of power, but I also get why we can't, because it would get destroyed. But yeah, it's hanging behind the Texas House of Representatives today. So this is the left flank of the Texian attack. You know where they're going. They're going toward the Mexican army, which is just beyond that tree line, beyond the ridge. Here we're now on the right flank of the infantry advance. This is where the regiment commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Henry Millard would have been organized. Millard was a druggist from Louisiana, and believe it or not, he has relations to both President Fillmore, or who would go on to become our 13th president, Millard Fillmore. He also has relations with Nathaniel Hawthorne. So he's a relative of Nathaniel Hawthorne and Millard Fillmore. That's random, but random facts is what I'm here for, guys. His regiment is the regular regiment. It's down over here on the right flank where you're going to find 2 companies of regulars and a battalion of Texian volunteers. Amongst this unit is 80 U.S. regular soldiers in full U.S. Army uniform, no less. What the heck are they doing in the Texian army? There is a theory. It can't be proven with written material, but a theory that Sam Houston may have been working with the Jackson administration. I don't know how true that is. This is what Fat Electrician claims in his video. I will say, when you go for the San Jacinto Battlefield Association records, I don't really find any of that on their website promoted. But he was marching toward the Sabine River. He was marching in the direction of the United States of America. And there was a United States Army of Observance along the Texas-U.S. border in April of 1836. Why are they sent there? It's said officially to handle threats by tribes that were living out in the frontier, attacking the western U.S. border. Convenient around that time, 80 U.S. soldiers deserted with full uniform and full equipment. They were well furnished, from what I've heard. That's all the more I'll say on that. No, one more thing. Houston planned this all out. Sam Houston was a mastermind of military genius, or at least in this moment, he was a military genius. So here comes Millard's regular regiment. Now, there is one additional Texian unit on the very extreme right flank. That would have been the Texian Cavalry Corps. So that's likely where Depp Smith is out there. Well, no, he's not. He's actually burning that bridge. I forgot. But I think that's where Juan Seguin would have been. He would have been out there with the Cavalry Corps. So he's out there on the very far right flank. And of course, again, you can see what direction we're heading toward the Mexican army. Yep. Yeah. Everybody got a shout in the chat. I want to see in the chat, remember the Alamo. Everybody, you have to do it. This is the moment you get to shout in the chat. This is the most appropriate stream to do it. We got to be like Sam Houston and Texian army, all shouting at once, charging upon the Mexican army who are not expecting us. In Books and Battlefield, he's really just getting them all out. Yeah, remember James McCrae, remember Paoli, remember the Chesapeake, remember the Maine. That one probably really confused those Texians if that was said. So here we are. They emerge from the tree line. They emerge from the brush. These twin sisters are being rolled by the artillery crews. And this is allowed to happen in full view of the Mexican army, by the way. There is no real report of major resistance until the Texians are basically upon the breastwork. The signal that is given to tell the Mexicans, oh, we may be in danger, is when the opening volleys of the Texian artillery blows open the breastwork. It seems Houston wanted several controlled volleys as they advanced toward the breastwork. But basically, after the first volley, the Mexican cannon that's up by the breastwork, it returns fire. Houston's actually knocked from his horse. This will be the first of a couple horses he loses today. He's knocked from his horse. Down he goes briefly. At that moment, Rusk, he's going to take charge briefly. He just said, basically, charge. The Texian army charges right up upon the breastwork. More rounds are fired by the twin sisters, softening up the breastwork. The Mexicans start running from their tents. They're half dressed. They're waking up. They have no idea what's going on. And by the time they get to the breastwork, those few soldiers that get up there to defend it, the entire Texian army is upon them. There's a brief but intense fight over the gun. And I'm going to go back to get this right, the books. I promise I'm going to get this pronunciation right. And it's the closest Mexican officer to the breastwork, to the lone cannon. That would have been our close friend. I got to pronounce it right. You gave me the pronunciation, and I must pronounce it right. That would have been our close friend, Manuel Castrillon. I don't know if he had any prior experience with the artillery corps, but that's what he's doing today. He gets a couple rounds off with the cannon, gets the order that, and they're firing all sorts of grape shot. This is likely where most of the Texian casualties are incurred in this brief moment, but it's one Mexican artillery piece. It's not enough. And then what follows is one of the most interesting final moments I've read about. It is said that Castrillon declares to everybody in the middle of the battle, I have never turned in the face of the enemy in my whole career. He then folds his arms and turns his back to the Texian army. He is knocked down, clubbed down. Texian officers try to stop the soldiers from beating up on him, but it's too late. Castrillon will be mortally wounded at the gun. And we'll talk about where he was ultimately buried at the end of our program. And this kind of sets a precedent for how the Texian soldiers are going to treat Mexican soldiers in what's left of this battle. Eventually, Sam Houston will get on another horse. He'll ride a little closer forward. He is this point actually shot in the ankle severely, and he starts losing a severe amount of blood. He will remain on the battlefield for the bulk of the brief fighting, but he will suffer a blood loss. Here's the blue arrow showing the advance of the Texians. We're kind of looking back toward the Texan camp. You can see they've come over the ridge. They're crossing into where the breastwork would have roughly been, at least according to Mr. Winters. It was in this region where the lone Mexican artillery piece was during the battle. And then over the ridge, the Texians plunge into the encampment. And here we are. We're actually, if you see that red dot in the middle of the image, that is Winter's monument to denote where he felt the center of the Mexican camp was. There is some speculation on that with archaeology. There has been a lot of archaeology has actually been conducted recently on the battlefield, and some support the markers, some not so much. So that's what I said. They're approximates. So personally, from the maps I've looked at, I think the Mexican camp was a little farther back. But to each their own. We are looking in the general direction of the Mexican camp. We are looking through the perspective of Texian soldiers as they charge forward. Book that I recommend, right now, I can only tell you what I've read for tonight's presentation. I bought this. Actually, I was gifted this a few years ago. I didn't buy it. I was actually gifted this by a friend of mine who I used to work with. This is Brian Kilmeade's Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers. So this is part Sam Houston biography, but I will admit only about a third of this book is truly about Sam Houston. A lot of it is about Houston's perspective on the Texas Revolution, but I will say like the whole latter half is about the runaway scrape and about the Battle of San Jacinto and the aftermath. So it's a very brisk read. I do know that Brian Kilmeade, people like Brian Kilmeade's prose, but I know sometimes he can get a little embellishing, get a little into the mythology. So keep that in mind when you read it. But it's a very fast-paced book, and it really pointed me in the right direction over what may have been going through Houston's mind and some of the decisions that he made leading up to the Battle of San Jacinto. So that's one book I'd recommend because it covers all the base. It's Sam Houston's perspective, essentially, on the Texas Revolution. So That would be. Oh, did you miss this? That's the book. Sam Houston's The Alamo Avengers by Brian Kilmeade. It's a brisk paced book of Houston's perspective in the Texas Revolution. I will say this is not really on San Jacinto, but if you want to really get into what motivated some of these guys to go to Texas, why they settled in Texas, and why they rebel against Mexico, I highly recommend Free Roads to the Alamo by William C. Davis. This was actually brought to me by a neighbor of mine who recommended it. I highly recommend it. It is a dense biography. It's on free men. It's on Travis. It's on Crockett. It's on Bowie. So it goes through all three guys and what led them to be at the Alamo. So if you want to know more about what motivated people to become Texians, highly recommend this book. I'd also recommend just look at the San Jacinto Battlefield website. I use that for a lot of my brief bios. I mean, it's not like the ultimate resource, but it's pretty well laid out. They had a lot of resources I got to use. And I recommend checking out the Alamo's website as well. They have a fantastic free database just to interact with that site on a digital basis. So those are my sources I would recommend. I'm hoping to find another book. I want to read more about the Texas Revolution. I just haven't had time yet. So those are the books I've been largely confined to. We'll do once the stream is over. So back to our story. Down we go into the Mexican camp. Yeah, it's called the Battle of San Jacinto, but I'm gonna be honest with you guys, it's over very quickly. The Mexican army really had no chance to defend itself. Any worthwhile defense was at the breastwork for a few moments. What ends up happening is the pressure of the Texians entering the camp lead to the Mexicans running into Peggy's Lake or running just west of it. And no quarter was given by Texian soldiers. This is partly done, and you can argue this is why the Santa Anna gave no quarter to the men of the Alamo or the men at Goliad, is because we're a rapidly moving army. We have no ability to take care of prisoners, to take prisoners. That's not a good reason to kill prisoners, but that may have been what was going through the minds of men like Sam Houston. That being said, it's also, this is vengeance. This is revenge for everything that had happened during the Texas Revolution. Eye for an eye. And it is brutal. The Battle of San Jacinto will ultimately lead to about 600 deaths for the Mexican army. There will be prisoners taken. There will be many prisoners taken, but only after Texian officers stepped in and basically had to do more to order their men to stop killing everybody than actually continuing the fight. It also helped that you had men like Juan Almonte amongst Santa Anna's force at the Battle of San Jacinto. And as I mentioned, he's a pretty good smooth talker. He's able to work himself out of sticky situations. And he would actually amass the largest single surrender of Mexican soldiers during the Texas Revolution. It's about 200 men that he's able to gather together and get them together. And he's able to parlay with the right people, talk them down from murdering them. And they're able to be taken as prisoner. But keep in mind, guys, the Mexican army at San Jacinto is bigger than the Texian army. If everybody was taken prisoner, would the Texians have been able to maintain them as prisoners? And if they did maintain themselves as prisoners, would this have been as decisive of a battle as we know it as? That's the ugly side of history. It is said that the Battle of San Jacinto lasted for just 18 minutes. However, prisoners would be rounded up and prisoners would be murdered several hours after the firing ceased. And this gives you an approximate view of what Peggy's Lake would have been. This area severely have changed over the years due to the change of river levels, the width of the channels. You can see it's a very marshy land, but it's not a field lake anymore. I showed you the Texian army, where they started, the Mexican camp. That's, of course, what the Texians have overrun. And in the foreground, you can imagine all these Mexicans trying to jump in or seek safety. There is controversy over Winter's marker for Juan Almonte's surrender site, as you see there in the lower corner. There's archaeologists shows that it was much farther from Peggy's Lake than people envisioned, much farther to the west. So something to keep in mind. And let's break down the final figures. 9 Texians are killed in the Battle of San Jacinto. About 30 are wounded. Sam Houston is actually amongst the wounded. He's actually one of the most severe wounded in the battle. The Mexican army, 630 killed, about 730 captured. But where was Santa Anna? As day turns to night, it's really difficult to ascertain who is amongst the prisoners that the Texians are taking in. And keep in mind, this is why the officers do not want their soldiers mass killing. First of all, because it's just inhumane, but also because we need Santa Anna. Santa Anna is the prize at the end of the day, the end of all of this. He's the man that's brought all this aggression to Texas. We need him. Well, the morning of April 22nd, Texian scouts are going to go to Vince's Bridge, or what was Vince's Bridge, and they find an odd-looking private. He's odd-looking because he has the coat of a private, but he has such a nice shirt underneath. Like, it's too clean to be a soldier shirt, too well ornate to be a soldier shirt. He'll be marched back into camp. Actually, he's marched basically past and up to Sam Houston, hoping that they could find some information about where Santa Anna went. And Houston basically kind of gives this man the death stare and goes, "Who are you, sir?" And at that moment, Santa Anna reveals, "Yeah, it's me. It's Santa Anna." And what follows is this very interesting meeting of the minds. I mean, it has been written about, there have been legends made. This is probably the most famous piece of art relating to the Battle of San Jacinto, and it's not even about the battle itself. It's about these two meeting. There's Sam Houston on a blanket underneath a tree. His leg is all stitched up after a shot. There's Santa Anna in a private's uniform, and then just this mob of Texian soldiers around. Houston's likely asking, what do you want me to do with this guy? Houston did ask, "You want to fight today?" Kind of nonchalantly. I'm sure he was asking the same thing to the men. What do we do with Santa Anna now that we have him? Houston already had known what he wanted done. The deal was he gave Santa Anna this opportunity that, you want to live? It's pretty simple. You agree to withdraw your army out of Texas. You will return any confiscated property from Texians. You will go back to your government, and you're going to negotiate that Texas is no longer part of Mexico, and you will recognize our independence. Now, as a military general, I, Sam Houston, cannot dictate these. I cannot write out these terms to you. You actually have to go to our government, and you got to hash it out like politicians. But I trust that my message has been pretty clear. That's at least what I think the short of it was said between Sam Houston and Santa Anna. We're not going to sign the peace terms here, but I'm going to tell you what you're going to tell my government and what you're going to tell your government back home what they're going to be. Or you can do it simply. I hate to bring up, I know I'm such a dork if I'm referencing movies, but the end of the 2004 Alamo, where they beautifully replicate this painting, by the way, which I highly appreciate. Basically is Santa Anna will settle for blood. I want Texas. Fewer badass words have been said in Hollywood and probably were said in real life. There's something to it. Santa Anna agrees because really he has no choice, because if he's allowed to fall in with any of these Texians or Houston froze him off, he's going to disappear from the record books, let's be honest. And this is why the Battle of San Jacinto is not merely a battle in the Texas Revolution, not merely the end of the Texas Revolution. It is said this is the birthplace of Texas. Some will say it's Washington on the Brazos. Others will say it's San Jacinto because of this moment. And here is what is claimed to be the surrender site. claimed the tree has been replanted. That is not the original tree. They have this large relief of the painting on that piece of that marker there, a piece of rock. It's a piece of rock. I know what it is. And that's the end of the Texas Revolution, right? Right? So the Battle of San Jacinto, while it is tactically impressive, like I said, this is, in my opinion, is a must-study campaign and battle for any military historian or any aspiring military officer. I would happily, after I give myself a few more years of edumacation on the San Jacinto campaign, I would happily love to teach students of history and students of the military about why you should study this. This is like perfect guerrilla operate. This is a perfect case of guerrilla warfare, case of drawing the enemy in, using Fabian tactics, picking your battlefield, picking your moment, manipulating the enemy into a disadvantaged position for them, and all the other fancy terms that you use. So highly recommend you study the Battle of San Jacinto on a tactical level. But in terms of the strategic, in terms of the litigation that results from this, it's a little messier. So you funny a story about Santa Anna trying to convince the Mexican government. So he had a long road to do that. So he goes to a place called Velasco, where he'll meet with interim President Burnett and meet with the Republic of Texas. And by all accounts, he agrees to what he's stating what Houston wanted. He's telling the Texan government, this is what Houston wanted. This is what we're going to do. I'm okay with it. I want to live. So he signs the Treaty of Velasco. There's a public and private treaty. The public treaty, which is issued out to the world, is that the Mexican army is withdrawing from Texas boundaries, that they're returning their property and will release any prisoners. The war itself is over. The private letter says that Santa Anna shall go to Mexico, plead our case to the Mexican government, and get them to recognize the border between Texas and Mexico. It takes him like almost a year to get back to Mexico. It's not his fault. Everywhere he goes in Texas, where he should be boarding a boat to go back to Mexico, he gets apprehended and threatened, and has to be put in like a jail so nobody tries to execute him or tries to assassinate him in the streets. Eventually, Sam Houston will be elected the new president of the Texas Republic at the same time that the Texan people vote. See, now I'm going to stop doing Texian. We're going to start doing Texan now because we're getting into the state of Texas. It's not a boulder. It's a rock. A beautiful rock. Sam Houston's elected president of Texas. The people of Texas also vote. They would very much rather be a state in the United States of America. Because, hey, we don't want the responsibilities of self-governance. No. We don't want to deal with all the financial headaches of that. We are happy to take the defense of the United States of America. So Houston gets word that Santa Anna is still in Texas at this point, and he decides to send him to Washington, D.C. as an ambassador of Texas. This was a wow to me. To appeal to President Jackson, Texas' case for statehood. Why is he picking Santa Anna? Because if Santa Anna wants to live and get back to Mexico, it's best to be aligned with Sam Houston, not with the rest of Texas. And also, hey, you plead a case for our statehood. You convince Jackson to make us a state. Guess what? No more fighting. No more aggression. So this happens. I still can't believe this happened. It happened. Santa Anna did meet President Jackson. Jackson wanted Texas to be a state. That was even before the revolution. He wanted his territory into the Union. But he admitted to Santa Anna, I can't. Well, first of all, I'm the president. I can't just make a state. It has to go for Congress and everything. We got to run it for Congress. And he's like, I'm going to be honest with you guys. We really should not be we really should not be pressing for Congress right now. Texas is a state because Texas is below the Missouri Compromise line, which means it would be a slave state. And it would be a massive territory for a slave state if admitted to the Union. It would upset the balance in Congress between free and slave state, and all the politics would go with that. Now's not the good time to do that. This is, we're still in the wake of the nullification crisis, and we're in the waning days of the Jackson administration anyways, too. So, like I said, this was actually one of like Jackson's last actions as president before he steps down and Van Buren becomes president. So, just curious little thing going on in the final moments before, the end of the Jackson administration. He is talking with the dictator of Mexico. It's just, I don't know. There's something charming to that to me. So Santa Anna finally goes back. He's given passage by the United States this time, and he finally gets back to Mexico. And when he appeals to the Mexican government, hey, so I've been gone for a year. Funny story about that. I got captured, and I was told that I had to give Texas over, or else I was going to be executed. To which the Mexican government goes, first of all, you are disgraced. You were captured. You went too far into Texas. How dare you spend all of our resources going on a wild goose chase? Second of all, well, if they threatened you, then it's null and void. It means nothing. We're not going to recognize these Treaty of Alaskos. And that's how it was for the next few years, basically. Mexico did not recognize it. It was in a quasi state of, we're not going to go fight Texas again, but we don't recognize its independence. The United States recognizes Texas independence, but is not ready to make it a state yet. Texas wants to be a United States member, but can't yet. And in the meantime, it got to lick its wounds from the Texas Revolution. So it's this very weird state. Is it a republic or is it actually a state? And this will go back and forth. Houston, the Republic of Texas, they had an interesting thing in their constitution where you can be president multiple times, but you couldn't have consecutive terms. So he served one 3-year term, stepped down. That guy I mentioned that saved Mr. Rusk, that got Mr. Lamar at San Jacinto, he gets elected a second president. And he breaks off all talks of annexation. He is fully in on, no, we're going to become our own country. He makes all sort of regime changes in Texas that Houston does not like. Houston runs again, gets reelected, undoes Lamar's stuff, reopens talks. What are we up to now? I think we're in the Tyler administration at this point. Reopens talks to re-annex the United States. This time Tyler takes the bait because President Tyler was ticked off of the world. He's a Whig in name only who's made president because the president passed away, President Harrison. None of the Whigs trust him because of his Democratic past, because of his Southern ties. The Democrats don't trust him because he's with the Whig party. So Tyler just says, you know what? Screw it. I know this is going to upset all the power balance in the United States Congress, but you know what? Congress, they don't like me. So yeah, you know what? I'm going to support talks of Texas annexation in Congress. Screw it. Why not? And as we all know, in December of 1845, Texas would be inducted into the Union as the 28th state of the United States of America after many shenanigans. That didn't appease Mexico because that legitimized Texas independence in the first place. As if the United States is bringing its territory into the United States of America, well, that means Texas actually did get its independence. And they also, it's the matter of nobody knew what the western border was of Texas. So that's where you get that lovely map from. Texas and the United States of America claimed the southern border was the Oasis River. Or my apologies. Texas and the United States claimed the southern border was the Rio Grande River. Mexico claimed the northern border from Mexico was an Oasis River. And they never could agree on where that border was. Texas cannot agree to it with Mexico, and now the United States can't. And this is going to lead to the Polk administration, when it steps into power, why the Mexican-American War happens. A disputed border, threats to that disputed border, and a whole bunch of other shenanigans. It's complicated, but very important. What became of our rivals? Well, as I said, Sam Houston will become a 2-term Texas president. He also, when he wasn't president, he also was in the Texas House of Representatives. After the state was annexed, or I should say the republic was annexed into a state, he'll go on to become the U.S. Senator of Texas. He'll become the governor of Texas. He's one of, I could be mistaken on this. He's one of the very few, if not, he's the only politician in American history to be governor and senator of different states. Yeah, he was pretty cool. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think at the very least on the governor. I don't know on the senator one, but I know on the governor, I think, because he was the governor of Tennessee and now he's the governor of Texas. I got to double check I said that right. We're going to go to old school. Yeah, I'm fading, guys. It's been a long day. I'm impressed the energy I've had tonight. I'm going to be quite honest. I kept it together better than I was anticipating. I should have these lovely notes. All right, Readout is going to retract the claim. He's one of the few men to be governors of different states. Senator Fing's different. He was part of the House of Representatives for Tennessee. He wasn't a senator for Tennessee. I'm sorry about my boo-boo there. But still an impressive feat, nevertheless. Interestingly enough, as he ages in Congress, as he ages as a governor, Sam Houston, though he is a slave owner, he owns slaves, vehemently opposed secession, especially the violence that was being spoke for southern states to secede, which is so interesting to me that the figure, really the military leader of a secessionist movement in 1836, in the 1850s, he is speaking against secession from the United States of America. It's interesting to note. I don't know what the morning break of that, just boy, how the times changed for Sam Houston. But it also came down to the fact, I think he abhorred violence. And something I've gathered from all this, for somebody who's I hold him highly as this great military leader. I think Sam abhorred violence above all else of all those that were on the San Jacinto battlefield. He is constantly fighting his own army's blood first. He's constantly having to pull the reins. And later in life, he's angry at abolitionists for violent actions they participate in to end slavery. He's equally angry at your other bushwhackers that are going out to Kansas that are trying to support slavery. He's just sick of the violence. He doesn't see the need for the violence. And he will be very outspoken against violence in relation to secession. And when we get to the 1860 presidential election, Houston tried to run as a nominee for the Constitutional Union ticket. He did not get that ticket. John Bell did, who Houston admired. It wasn't like a malicious thing when Bell got the nomination of Houston. But that's an interesting point. So Houston's name was in the hat in the very important 1860 election. And actually people in Texas still voted him, believe it or not, in the 1860 election. Of course, it didn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. But it also shows you how divided our country truly had become by 1860, that even people were throwing in their name for Sam Houston, that Sam Houston is important to talk about in the 1860 presidential election, even though everybody knows he's not actually going to win it, but he still has an impact. And then, well, we all know what happens to Texas. Texas chooses to secede from the Union, and essentially Sam Houston is deposed. He refuses to go with the Confederate States of America. He wishes to stay with the Union, and he is deposed. He will die in 1863. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna would have, to my calculations, 7 more terms as president of Mexico. 7 more. Dear Lord. I don't understand you, Mexico. Sometimes he was in exile. Sometimes he was brought back. Then he was sent back to exile. Then at one point he got his leg shot off, believe it or not, when he was fighting the French in the Pastry War. Yeah, there was a war called the Pastry War in Mexico, between Mexico and France. Weird. And then eventually he ends up becoming general. He comes out of exile again to command Mexican troops in the Mexican-American War. We'll go back to Books and Battlefields earlier quote about Winfield Scott whipping Santa Anna on the battlefield like Hulk whipping Loki. Yeah, it's kind of true. Yeah, I think the last time he was president was like in the 1850s, no less. I would describe him as Mexico's both most revered and vilified leader simultaneously. This is their, you always hear his name thrown out as one of the big military leaders from Mexico, but I'm going to be quite honest with you guys. I'm like, I want to do more research on Santa Anna in the future. I would love to read a biography on him. I want to read more about his perspective of things because a lot of the decisions he makes they don't line up when I read about them. I don't understand how he fought a lot of these seemingly rash actions, how these would lead to good results. And I'm wondering, no, were there other generals in the Mexican army far more capable than Santa Anna, but maybe didn't have the political prowess as he did, or have the flamboyancy as him, and that's why they didn't rise above Santa Anna. I think I've heard some say General Ria, the guy who, by the way, we completely forgot to mention him. He was still out there until Santa Anna signed the Treaty of Velasquez. So General Ria was very close to the San Jacinto battlefield, a few days march. So that was a valid threat to Sam Houston as well. But I've heard a lot of people say General Urea, U-R-R-E-A, that he was superior in tactics, and then he basically had almost a flawless career during the Texas Revolution, all of his battlefield victories. The big blight was the fact that when he was away from Goliad is when Santa Anna authorized the massacre. I think Santa Anna corrupted the system of politics to be elected that many times. Yeah, that's a bit of an understatement. Great book on the Mexican-American War of the Mexico City campaigns called Gallant Little Army. Ooh. I have a book over here about Monterrey I need to read someday. I bought that like almost a decade ago. Just never got to it. And as we wind down tonight's stream, our virtual battle walk of San Jacinto, the battlefield is preserved, part of it at least. It is a battlefield park today, visited by many people who visit Houston, Texas. The first monument was the B.R. Brigham Monument in 1881. It was raised over the grave of one of the 9 Texians killed in the battle, B.R. Brigham Monument. There were supposed to be additional monuments over every grave, but only Brigham's got the big monument. So it's kind of seen as a monument to all the Texians killed on the battle that day. The famous monument is the San Jacinto Monument. Let's break them numbers down again. Got to break down the numbers. Now, I used Wikipedia the first time. So, let me look up here. I'm going to pull the stats from a more reliable source to appease the research gods, to redeem myself. Let's go to they have a media kit. The San Jacinto Monument from the official media kit of the San Jacinto Museum and Battleground. Groundbroken in March of 1936 to commemorate the centennial of the Texas Revolution. It was dedicated April 20th, 21st, 1939 on the actual anniversary of the battle. It was designed by A.C. Finn and constructed by the W.S. Bellows Construction Company. It cost $1.5 million. And that's later stage Depression era money, keep in mind. It stands at 567.31 feet tall and weighs approximately 70 million pounds. The San Jacinto Monument was constructed over a period of 3 years as a memorial to all those who would fight to win the independence of Texas. Efforts to design and construct the memorial were led by Houston businessman Jesse H. Jones. The monument is the tallest masonry column in the world. It is more than 12 feet taller than the Washington Monument. It weighs approximately 70 million pounds. The star atop the monument, which symbolizes the Lone Star State, is 34 feet tall and weighs approximately 220 tons. The monument is faced with Texas Cordova shellstone, a type of limestone noted for its creamy color and fossilized texture. The phrases around the base of the shaft depict 8 important episodes of the history of the Republic. The carvings were designed by William McVeigh. Behold, the San Jacinto Monument. And for a period of time between 1948 and 2022, they went another step in commemorating the battle. They parked the freaking USS Texas next to the battlefield. Yeah, the oldest battleship, actual battleship of the U.S. Navy still afloat. Yes, yes, yes. Olympia, that's a protected cruiser. Yes, yes, yes. Constitution, that is a super frigate. True battleship class warship. USS Texas is the oldest American battleship. It is currently down for a massive restoration. Since 2022, it's been in Galveston down for a massive restoration work. It will not be returning to the San Jacinto battlefield. The reason is they believe they'll get much higher attendance if it's parked in Galveston in the city instead of being at the battlefield. They said every year since the USS Texas had been parked at the monument, while it was an interesting sight, it was too far out of the way for people to visit, like to drive out of Houston, the 16 miles. So it was at an operating loss every year. So I wish I wish I would have been able to see the USS Texas overlooking the San Jacinto battlefield, but I understand why it's going to be relocated. It's relocated to Galveston. And as we mentioned, one of the veterans, a guy by the name of Mr. Winters, he came back in the early 1900s and helped the Daughters of Texas Revolution place small granite markers around the battlefield, denoting the approximate locations of key events, which allowed us tonight to virtually walk in the footsteps of the Texian army, of this victory that led to Texas independence, and really was this massive turning point for westward expansion of the United States of America. And I want to wrap up with these two images. So the image at the top is for a cemetery that is actually located on the San Jacinto battlefield. Now, it wasn't there during the battle. These graves were relocated. These graves were relocated many years later when the river channel was changed. Sorry guys, I can't find my notes on this segment. I'm sorry. I don't know where they went. Okay, there we go. The cemetery is a family burial ground. It was originally across the Buffalo Bayou on the opposite side of the river from the battlefield, and it was on property that was owned by Lorenzo de Zala, who would go on to become vice president during the Republic of Texas era. So he was a very key businessman and politician in the Texas Republic and later the Texas state. And he was one of those individuals I mentioned that actually was very cordial to Castrillon. That was cordial to Castrillon early on in Castrillon's military career. So when Manuel Castrillon was killed in action at the Battle of San Jacinto, believe it or not, Zavala, if I can pronounce it, Zavala, he requested actually to have Castrillon buried in his family plot across the Buffalo Bayou. And while there's not a headstone, when the graves were relocated to the San Jacinto battlefield because the Buffalo Bayou was expanded for shipping, so the De Zavala, why is there to be a V there? The De Zavala estate was largely destroyed because of the shipping channel. That likely means that Castrillon's remains were reinterred here in view of the San Jacinto Monument on the battlefield, which is just fascinating to me that one of the Mexican generals of the Texas Revolution who took part in the attack on the Alamo and was at San Jacinto, he was vilified by the Texans. I mentioned he had a brutal demise. They bludgeoned him to death essentially by the cannon. He was allowed to be buried with honors on a Texas family plot and is now buried, even though unmarked, somewhere on the San Jacinto battlefield. And there's something really fascinating to me about that how things can turn after 190 years, how much can change. And as I mentioned, it is a battlefield. It's not, for many years people were thinking that the San Jacinto battlefield, well, it got whitewashed. Well, water washed actually from it being a swampland, from two rivers flooding around there, the channels for the shipping lanes being changed. People assumed there was nothing left from the battle. Well, in the early 20th century, they started doing digs. There was a surprising amount of artifacts that have been unearthed from the San Jacinto battlefield. So a reminder that, yeah, this is where it occurred. And this is essentially a war grave. So that's a photograph of a bayonet they found where they think Juan Amante actually surrendered. Based upon how the pile of artifacts were, how they were thrown, they think it looked like a surrender site. So, and that's all I got to say tonight. That is the Battle San Jacinto. The 190th anniversary was actually this past Tuesday, but I want to give myself a couple extra dates to prepare for tonight's stream. I love getting to do these virtual battle walks, these battle discussions. I get really into them, as you can tell. And I try my best. I'm going to be honest, when I talk about these battles, I am not professing to be an expert. I just want everybody to know who's been through that. My research, I won't deny, is probably pretty slapped together. It's done in haste while I'm doing other projects. But like I said, Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers, that's one of my main sources. I read, preparing to learn more about Sam Houston and what led him in the runaway scrape and what culminates in the Battle of San Jacinto. I also have the William Davis book, The Free Roads to the Alamo, which I used more to read about the free men we talked about when we did our Alamo stream, but I did brush upon it again. And I highly recommend you check out the San Jacinto Battlefield website itself. It is a wealth of information. It's well organized. I was very impressed. I'll drop a link in the chat if you want to explore. I'm going to be honest, I just kept, there was a, what was the name of it? From, what was it? Military Warfare. Well, the one magazine was Warfare History Network. I read an article from there as well. It's in the citations. So when I put these together, I'll be honest, I'm trying to strive for my best. I may get things wrong, especially pronunciations. I'm a stickler for failing to pronounce the English language. Don't even try to get me to speak the Spanish language. I took 4 years of Spanish, believe it or not, too. I passed because of the cultural aspects, not the linguistic aspects. So I also just do these because I love talking live about history. I mean, I enjoy making the videos, but it is fun to talk about it live. The best thing to do is to be on location, talking to people live about it, because then you're fully immersed into the experience. So we're not into full immersion by doing it as a live stream, but we can have fun doing it nevertheless. And yep, I would correlate with Books and Battlefields motto with how I research history for productions like this. You never stop learning. You've kept up my motto today and helped me with it. Well, I appreciate that. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. But before you head off tonight, there's some housekeeping. There's always housekeeping. First things first, if you have not done so already, if you tuned in, be sure to hit the like button from where you're watching to let either the TubeU, X, or Rumble algorithm know you do want to use social media to get edumericated, to enrich your noggin, not to rot your brain. So I'd appreciate the likes if you enjoyed the stream. If you want to follow us in our future vendors, be sure to subscribe here to Redot Productions. You'll be the first notified then when a new video goes live or we're doing a live stream. I normally post a new video Saturdays, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. New video coming out this Saturday. We're going back to Gettysburg. We're going to be talking about the 142nd Pennsylvania. Particularly, we're going to be talking about two young men who served in the 142nd, whose final resting place is not far from my home, believe it or not. Live streams, they're kind of as I'm available. I'm going to be honest, this may be the last live stream I do for a little while. I got a lot going on, so I'm going to take a bit of a breather. So thank you guys for watching. And if you want, I forgot to mention, if you want early access to videos, and if you want to see some behind the scenes material, like certain scripts, certain photographs, select deleted scenes even, if that sounds interesting to you and you want to support this channel regularly, you can join our membership program, The Garrison. Links to it, our coffee page. I was told by a member of one of my tours the other week, it is not Ko-fi, it is to be coffee. I'm going to keep saying Ko-fi. Link to our Ko-fi page in the description below where you can join The Garrison, our monthly membership program. One time, Great stream until I flub up my lines. Right, Michael? It's a great stream until I flub up my lines. How's the draft going, Michael? I haven't been paying attention for the past 2 hours. Did the Browns do good? Have the Browns got good picks, Michael? Did the Steelers get good picks? I'm not going anywhere near that freaking draft. I may be in the Pittsburgh area. I ain't going to the heart of Pittsburgh. We ain't going downtown. I don't care if there's Primanti sandwiches. I'm not going through that horde of traffic. That's why we're all ticked off, Michael, about the draft. It's not that we don't want big events hosted in our cities, but our city has a terrible infrastructure, which one day will make for a great series of videos. I have thought about doing streams or just do series of videos where I just rant about bridges and the history of bridges. We need to do a video about the Greenfield Bridge. We need to. The legacy of the Greenfield Bridge. The bridge where they literally built a second bridge to catch the first one when it fell. What was I saying? Oh, Ko-fi page. So if you want to become a member of the channel, the Garrison, links in the description below, Ko-fi page, early access to videos. You get access to select scripts, behind the scenes photographs and videos, and my unyielding gratitude for fortifying this bastion of historical preservation. And you get your name in the videos. I haven't figured out how to do that on the live streams. I need to do that on the live stream, but you get them in the videos. Hey, thank you guys for watching. Did we or did you get a boring offensive lineman? It's coming. It's coming. When we do these virtual battle walks, I'm fully focused on it. Hey, thank you for tuning in again, Michael. Your video goes live for Gettysburg. Very good. I'm just trying to see if I missed anybody. I think Spanish is tough. Try taking a Latin class. No. I will not subject my tongue to that. No. All right. Oh, I forgot Swords of Starships. Oh, he did do the Remember the Alamo, and then he, of course, did Don't Give Up the Ship. Of course, you have to do Don't Give Up the Ship. You have to say it, Don't Give Up the Ship. And yes, we have Panini. We do. All right, I need to end the stream, or else I'm just going to fall asleep on it. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell.